you have enjoyed the first and the second segment. Now we are on the first guest platform where we are going to discuss Sudan conflict and evacuation, as well as how it affects African Union. And the person who is going to be doing the justice. So this one is the media aide to Governor Ademola Adeleke, Mr. Shola Ishola. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
You're welcome to the program, Mr.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, before we start the discussion proper, let's watch this. Located in the northern part of Africa has had its shares of crises since it got independence from Britain in 1956. The country had witnessed two prolonged civil wars. The first lasted from 1955 to 1972, while the second began in 1983. Although both wars have been fought largely in the southern part of the country, their aims were diverged. The first aimed at independence and autonomy of the South, whereas the second primarily aimed at restructuring the central political institutions and devolving power on marginalized areas. All the Sudanese who witnessed these wars that spanned for decades are yet to forget the trauma and harrowing experiences they had during the period. And right now, another clashes have broken out. A legal practitioner, Mr. Moses Obaditon, traced the genesis of the prolonged crisis in Sudan.
For over 50 years, the Sudanese were fighting what we call internal or civil war among themselves in order to demarcate between the southern and the northern Sudan. And eventually, I think about 10 years ago, they succeeded in creating that demarcation. And so we have two countries out of one country. However, the current one is another internal within two warlords who successfully, topple a military government and install themselves. So to us, it is a game of ego. It is one of the problems of African power tussle. So their main goal is not the people. It's just about self. And for us to be able to understand it better is to look at how Africa internal crisis has always cost lives, property, and underdevelopment. And if you look around within that geographical area, when you compare a country like Egypt, and you compare it to Sudan, you see Sudan is far behind in terms of development in almost all perspectives.
The renewed clashes erupted in the middle of April this year amid an apparent power struggle between the two main factions of the military regime, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who is considered to be the de facto ruler and has the loyalty of the Sudanese armed forces, and the paramilitaries of the Rapid Support Forces, a collection of militia that followed the former warlord, General Mohamed Dagolo. The power struggle was said to have had its roots in the years before a 2019 uprising that ousted former ruler Omar al-Bashir, who built up formidable security forces, which he was alleged to have deliberately set against one another. Otumba Jumoke Ogunkayede and citizen Lolawe said the Ego War, which has led to loss of lives and wanton destruction of property, should be stopped in the interest of the people.
If you're looking for a job as a manager, one, they want to know if you're married. Two, they want to know if you have children. So which means you have been able to deal with a crowd, even within your home setting. There will always be people like that in every society. In biblical time, you have Thomas, Didymus, and so on and so forth. People who, and Judas Iscariot, people who face a problem so that they can, that's how their lives are made. There will be some people there who may not necessarily want peace. There are others that's their creation, and they're not doing it because they hate anybody. It's their creation to put a peaceful society at war.
I think the only way to silence the guns is to stop production of destructive weapons. That's the only way to silence guns in the world, and to encourage people dialoguing, talking. There's nothing that cannot be resolved with dialogue. After World War, we still go to dialogue. So I think the crisis in Sudan is as a result of failure to place emphasis on dialoguing to resolve issues rather than going to war. And I want to use this opportunity to appeal to Nigerians to also follow peace.
Reports say the renewed violence in Khartoum, the Sudanese capital, have claimed so many lives, while thousands of people have been displaced internally, while the country risks regional spillover of refugees. This has led to a drastic setback to development of the country and caused severe humanitarian crisis. Several of Sudan's neighbors, including Ethiopia, Chad and South Sudan, have been affected by the political upheavals in the country. Similarly, many countries have had to evacuate their citizens from the crisis-torn areas. Nigeria inclusive. Otumba Ogunkayede stated that the time has come for African Union AU and the United Nations UN to rise to the occasion.
Basically in Sudan you have two people, a general and another general. One became president, the other is the vice president. I think there will be personality issues, personality clashes. And who is this man? I joined the army in 1960. He was still a secondary school student. Now they made him to come ahead of me now. I will show him what I know. So it's still possible to contain the crisis as is now. But unless it's done within a specified time, it can lead to a war where you now find Mauritania supporting somebody and find Gabon supporting the other. So now it can still be it's resolvable now if the African people, the other statesmen in Africa will come together who had been in power before and bring both of them together.
Why citizens Lola Way stress the need for Nigerian leaders to make the country conducive for the citizens to reduce the large number of people jetting out of the country in search of greener pastures on a daily basis.
We should make our country safe so that Nigerians can remain in Nigeria. It is because of the level of insecurity, unemployment and all the bad things that are happening in Nigeria that has forced Nigerians to go outside the shores of Nigeria. That is, we must address that issue first of all, and then talk about response. The response time has never been. I also want to appeal to countries like Ethiopia that I'm not sure, that has been discriminating against Nigerians. And somebody said that discriminating attitude is as a result of their fear of Nigerians staying put in Ethiopia, instead of using Ethiopia as a transit route, that Nigerians may decide to stay put in Ethiopia instead of transiting out of Sudan through Ethiopia.
In his submission, another analyst, Mr. Shola Ishola, maintained that one of the ways of putting a permanent stop to the violence which erupted between military factions after the faltering transition to civilian-led government is to ensure that power is not returned to the military.
First thing is that I recommend is for African Union to step in to Sudan and retire the two generals that are fighting. I don't see any of them backing down to each other. They've been in the army for long, because I don't think either of them will be willing to submit to one another. And I think also because what actually happened is that Sudan was trying to transition from military into civilian rule. And I think if Sudan transitioned into civilian rule, the challenge of generals fighting each other would reduce. So I would recommend also that transitioning into the civilian rule in Sudan is completed. At the end of that, I think that the challenge in Sudan will go to an end.
The respondent noted that it is high time African leaders started thinking about how to move the continent and individual countries forward. A feat they maintain can never be achieved in an atmosphere full of chaos. Oluchi Amuda, Osbc News. Yes, you are welcome back. If you just joined us, it is still the Saturday morning treat, and we just watched a report on the crisis in Sudan. We have a guest in the house. We've already been introduced, Mr. Shola Ishola. You're welcome once again.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, crisis in Sudan. What exactly is the genesis? Sudan is not really new. Crisis is not new in Sudan. I think they are kind of used to it. Why has it always been that way?
Well, because just like in the history of Nigeria, if you check our history and you read through the times that we had challenge, many of the challenges has been because of the coup, military coup, a leader being ousted by another person who wants to be the leader. So, for instance, in Sudan, what happened initially was a part of the country wanting to break away from the other, and some years ago, maybe a decade ago, they were able to do that, and then they separated from each other. Now, this current one is different because it's not like a part of the country is wanting to pull away. It's just two people fighting each other. But because they have access to power, they have access to ammunitions, that's why it's been tough. When you have two people, when you have an army in a country, and they're broken into two factions. Some officers in the army are loyal to a particular general. The other one, RSF, is also is like a wing of the army in Sudan, but a strong wing. And then the officers of that wing, RSF, they're also loyal to their leader, right? And that's where the challenge came from. And like this is a problem of transition. Unlike Nigeria, when we wanted to move from military to civilian, Sudan wanted to do negotiation. Let's transition this government of military into civilian. But then the challenge came up when the issue of the military architecture of the country was discussed. And the challenge was Al-Burhan and Dagolo are generals of different... Dagolo is leading RSF. Al-Burhan is leading generally the army of the country. Now the challenge becomes who will be superior to another in the new civilian system. Will Dagolo be the leader or Al-Burhan? And that's the genesis of the issue. The issue is ego-centered. The issue is about who becomes the leader between two generals of almost the same hierarchy in the Sudanese military.
But when you look at that one, it's as if when you are talking about military, it's always like that conflict here, conflict there. Even it happened to Nigeria some times ago when the leader we have divided loyalty among the followers, but our own was not up to that level. But when you look at it, the head of the country, then having the other person as another faction. Can we say that the head is he capable to operate effectively, to command everything into one unison?
Yeah, no, but you see, I'm even surprised at the conversation that is trending across Africa, because when you call somebody the head, I don't see is the head, right? So if you call somebody the leader of the country, everybody in the country is supposed to submit to that person, right? If you call somebody like I've listened to someone said that maybe because Al-Burhan, Dagolo probably got into the army before Al-Burhan, or maybe Al-Burhan is supposed to be, Dagolo is supposed to be a superior officer to Al-Burhan. I don't know any of that, but my own thinking is if you call somebody the leader of the country, everybody in the country is supposed to be, submitting or submissive to that head. And then, so for instance, in this case, Al-Burhan is the leader of the country, right? And so, like that's why I've said, okay, if my own thinking is, if these two guys would not be able to resolve their issues, then we retire them from the military. Let them go home.
Right. So talking about retiring them from the military,
yeah,
who does that? Because the clashes or the violence is increasing. The intensity is becoming more and more each day, and the international organizations are there watching.
Yeah.
Who retires them?
You see, this issue in Sudan, it brings back to the fore the fact that African Union is. We're getting to know now that African Union is actually not a union.
Okay.
Because
so what?
It's just a group of people going to a meet and spending African money.
All right.
I don't know what they do. I don't know what they do.
Because you know that they have their protocol. They cannot just jump into a country.
What are those protocols?
They have to follow the
I'm not against them having protocols.
Okay.
You have protocols. But when it becomes I mean, this is not Sudan fighting Ethiopia or Sudan fighting Egypt. It's an internal issue, right? And then if we now have, I mean, these guys attend AU meeting, right? And none of them is going to be able. I mean, since this issue started, what have we seen the AU said?
Nothing.
Ethiopia is hosting the AU headquarters, and Ethiopia is barring people from Sudan to enter their country. So if Ethiopia, that is hosting our headquarters as African Union, is barring people from entering their country in a time like this, then you understand what I'm saying. That AU, I understand protocols. There are protocols, but this is an emergency situation. What are they doing about it? I have not read anywhere where AU have said anything or done anything in the last 1 week or more that the issues have started. So what is AU doing? That's a question that we should ask ourselves. Because if there's actually an African Union and there's an internal crisis in a country, I'm not asking them to break into the country.
Because of sovereignty.
Sudan is a sovereign nation. I'm not asking them to break into the country. But they can call these two generals. Because this issue, somebody had said maybe they negotiate or they bargain or whatever, I don't know. But I see that if they bargain, by the time Sudan eventually transition into civilian, these two guys will still continue their fight. Right? So that's why I said, if you can step in and invite these two guys, let them bring to the table their conditions, and let's see how we can resolve this issue. Two people fighting each other. This is two fighting, like you see
two leaders.
Well, everybody's a leader in their own right. These two people fighting each other.
You're still talking about the AU now. Now we had stories about some African leaders, retired ones, that have actually been engaged in peace mission, especially in countries where they experience military coup. Now, most of the time, this AU has actually come under huge criticism because the leaders will not meet and say, our people are suffering. Let's improve their lot. So when they now revolt and probably engage in coup or any other attitudes that are not actually favorable, the leader will now go in and start mediating. Now, why can't African leaders sit together and decide on how to move the continent forward?
It's just a natural human phenomenon, right? Because it's simple.
Okay.
We have presidents of nations who, in their own right, are like gods in their countries.
Okay.
You bring them together and say, you be the head. In that meeting, you will hear somebody say, you cannot dictate for me what I do in my country. Right? I mean, you see the way African presidents are regarded and treated. There's also a challenge of, okay, is Nigeria superior to Egypt? Or Nigeria superior to Algeria? Or Ethiopia? Or Kenya? Or South Africa? So, and then Africans are not known to submit to laws that doesn't favor the leaders. So in this regard, for instance, if there is a law that says maybe in your country there's a particular percentage of your finances that should go to education, for instance, I'm not even sure Nigeria will respect that. And that's where the challenge is. That's where the challenge really is. There's an issue of connectivity between African leaders. There's an issue of being able to support each other. For instance, Nigerian students returning to Africa, returning to Nigeria, had issue in Egypt. Visa issue. They were not staying in Egypt. They were only passing Egypt to come to Nigeria, and they had visa issues. Is Egypt not aware there's a challenge in Sudan and Nigerian students are returning? You see, these are issues of relationship. Countries, African countries, being able to relate with each other. It's terrible that we don't have that cordial relationship.
So what is AU all about? The charter that establishes it. What?
He said it's protocols.
Because okay. Beside AU, let us look at other international organizations. Talking that are now different countries are trying, instead of resolving issue, they are now trying to evacuate their indigenous from Sudan.
Well, they need to evacuate before they are killed.
Yes, there's nothing bad in that. But what is their influence? That is when you talk about the other international...
their influence?
Yes, their influence.
You see, I don't know how best to answer that question. Because nobody in Africa, I repeat, in Africa can override a general in the military in any African country. Nobody in Africa can impose on any general in any African country. Right? And that's why I'm saying bring them to the table and ask them to go home. And only AU can do that. Unfortunately, we are looking to UN to do that for us. UN, in my own opinion, would take side on one of the two generals. They're not likely going to say two of them should go away. They would likely give support to one of the two generals. See the case of Russia and Ukraine. That's two countries fighting each other. Some countries are on the side of Ukraine, some countries are on the side of Russia, and Ukraine is suffering. Mass burial every day. So I don't know how best they will handle that, but I think that AU can step in, invite the two generals, and then bring them to the table. If it's possible, retire the two of them.
But you have described them as a toothless dog.
Well, so to an extent, and I don't want to say this, I'm not supposed to be saying this on here, but I think that many times when this kind of bargaining is being done, there's an underdog.
Okay.
Especially in the military, there's always an underdog. I'm telling you for a fact today, these two generals can be removed, eliminated by another underdog in the military. Just one person, and you wouldn't know who the person will be. I'm not recommending elimination because I'm saying these two guys can actually back down.
You're talking about relief.
I'm talking about backing down, because if you transition the country into civilian rule, one of them can be president, and the other maybe the other maybe can continue leading the military architecture. But the question will now be, if one is president and the other is leading the military, will the man leading the military be submissive to the president?
Moved them. And none of them would like to be removed.
No. Well, so this is it. That's actually the system, that's actually the appropriate way AU is supposed to be operating. If they are going to be able to do that, AU should be able to say, go home. Go home. AU should be able to say that. Because one of them, ideally representing the country in the AU, is supposed to be submissive to whatever is said in the AU. But AU is not saying anything. That's my point.
Now, what has the AU actually, what has the organization achieved since inception?
Well, maybe they will be the one that will be blowing their own horns.
Okay.
Right?
No, as an analyst, what physical achievements have you witnessed?
I don't know. Than meetings. Let me even tell you.
Okay.
When AU was built, their headquarters in Utopia, Taiwan government volunteered to build. African leaders cannot build headquarters for themselves. A country in Asia volunteered to build our headquarters for us. With the amount of money we spend on cars for our president. Some African president go out with 44 cars, 30 cars, 40 cars. You need to see the security architecture of an African president. Maybe it's next to the one of US or UK. Taiwan government volunteered to build for us. Then later they realized that maybe Taiwan has they've how do they call them? They have gone into a relationship with another European country, and that is spy device installed in the building, which would mean that each time African leaders are meeting, they are being spied upon. Then they abandoned that structure and then went to, you see, I don't know for a fact. I think they've been ineffective. They've been very ineffective. We've seen issues happen in African countries, and then we are going to the United Nations. I'm not against us going to the United Nations, But when it's not intercontinental issues, when there are issues that are African, that is African related, why do we need to go to a white man to resolve our own issues for us? It's terrible. It's because our leaders always want to be in power. They don't want to go home. They want to enjoy the benefits of the office, the money, everything in the office till they die.
As you have talked,
and it's not kingship.
You have talked about the leaders. Let us come back home. On Sunday, last week Sunday, US and some other countries, they have started evacuation. Then even till yesterday, we have seen that Nigeria is yet to do the just. Then what is
they have done it?
Yes, the delay.
Yeah.
You know, when it started, some lives have been lost. Then what is your comment about the system that Nigeria is using to evacuate?
I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I'm disappointed in the Nigerian government. Right? Let me tell you why I said that. I was here during the week, and I said there's a slow approach to which we are rescuing our citizens in Sudan. And then because we had Air Peace offering to airlift Nigerians for free, but the Nigerian government didn't take that option, and then they opted to use buses. I hope you saw the amount of money spent on that. Now, on their way, they went to the country, picked Nigerian students, and then on their way to Egypt, those buses stopped in the desert, and the drivers said that until they are paid, they won't continue the journey. These students contributed money on their way to Nigeria to be given the drivers to continue the journey. Then that same day that they were in the desert, the head of Nigerian Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri-Rewa, was paying the president-elect a courtesy visit. That's where I got pissed off. Your agency is overseeing a process of retrieving students from a warring country, and you are paying courtesy visit to somebody who you can see anytime you want to. I don't understand it. I do not understand it. It means you don't care about them. It's an insult to all Nigerians. It's an insult. And then she was taken up on Twitter by some Nigerians, and then she said that it wasn't our agency that was handling the operation. Yeah, we understand. NEMA was handling it. But it was, until those students return to Nigeria, they are under your purview. And you leave your office to pay a courtesy visit to President-elect. It's not done anywhere in the world. In a situation, you're handling an emergency situation, and you leave your office to go and pay a courtesy visit. What is the benefit of the courtesy visit to someone who has not been sworn in as the president? If you had been sworn in as the president, we would say you went to take instruction or you went to brief the president. Until May 29, he can't give an instruction that stands. Only President Buhari can. You didn't go to the villa to see President Buhari. And then she even shared those pictures on her Twitter page, Instagram page. I'm wondering, is this really a country?
Okay, you are wondering, is this really a country? Let's look at generally Nigerian government's response to emergencies.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's very terrible. Countries who are far away in another continent, in the matter of days, are able to send their emissaries to Sudan to rescue their own citizens. In Nigeria, we are discussing if we should go by air or by road. And then we are now discussing if we should buy buses or rent them. And then the amount of money, you see the amount of money spent on that purpose? If not because the drivers stopped on the way, we wouldn't even know that they were not paid to do that job. So who didn't pay? Is it the federal government that didn't pay the drivers, the company, or the company didn't pay their drivers? I'm sure drivers don't. I mean, I've traveled by road several times by transport companies, so I understand their processes.
But when we look at the number of Nigerians stranded in Sudan compared to some other countries, it seems as if Nigerian population are the most. And therefore, the process which we shall to transport the numbers, we heard that 5,000 students, but they are more than double of that number when we look at Nigeria in that place. You can't compare Nigeria with higher population to those countries who are very low that can just use one or two buses. Okay. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
No, I'm not
therefore,
saying.
when you look at the medium of payment, the means of payment of a country to an organization will not be a cash to cash. We must follow certain due process. Therefore, can we say that Nigeria is too slow?
You see, you saw what happened. I mean, how do you say that you are rescuing people? Rescue. The word rescue is important. And then your means of rescue is stranded. Your means of rescue is is affected. Rescue, you call it a rescue operation. I mean, if you have seen how, okay, somebody got stranded in Ghana. She's a Ghanaian, but she's a US citizen, and she was able to send a message across to her people in US that she got stranded. Over 100 US Army officials went to Ghana to rescue one person, because it's called a rescue operation. So if you are rescuing someone and the process is having issues like that, it means you don't value their lives. That's my point. You don't value their lives.
Yeah, right.
How do you say that? Okay, I understand how money is sent and all of those things and all of those things, but why? Why does it happen? Why did it happen that the drivers were stopping on the way? How come these drivers left Nigeria, got to Sudan, picked Nigerian students, and then he also brings to the fore the fact that we don't actually like each other in this country. We just form that love that we share. We don't actually like each other. The drivers are Nigerians. Nigerians bringing Nigerians out of crisis.
They are working for a company.
It doesn't matter. You are bringing your own people out of issues, out of a war, and then you park in the desert and say you are not going anymore till you are paid. What's the intention? If the money wasn't sent or if the money wasn't paid or the issue was not resolved, would they sleep in the desert? Are they not Nigerians? Are we not Nigerians? Who is to pay? Is it the people you are rescuing or the people who sent you on the operation? We don't love each other. We just form it.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ashada. Before we go to the Yoruba aspect of the program, let's briefly look at the effects of the war so far on the clashes, and everyone, all countries are campaigning to rescue their citizens and all that.
Well, there are a lot of side to that question, because after the war, Sudan will now start spending money on quite a number of renovations. Some facilities will be rebuilt and all of that. Then they would now families will start counting their losses, right? And so it tells how unrealistic people can be. So because if you want to lead a country and then you first of all destroy that country before you lead it, I don't know your intentions.
Sudan kò sí orílẹ̀-èdè tí ò fara gbá ń bẹ̀. Kí ni tó fà gan-an?
Ìṣẹ̀rí ìjà tó ṣẹlẹ̀ ní Sudan, èèyàn méjì ní bára wọn jà. Nítorí kan ṣẹlẹ̀ ní pé àwọn méjì jẹ́ ọ̀gágun, wọ́n jẹ́ ọ̀gá ní iṣẹ́ ológun. Àwọn méjì sì ní ọmọlẹ́yìn tó pọ̀, tó ń kálukú wọn níbọn àti ẹ̀ lọ́wọ́. Torí pé wọ́n wá jẹ́ pé wọ́n ní ọmọlẹ́yìn tó pọ̀ pẹ̀lú ìbọn lọ́wọ́, olófà tí ìjà yẹn fi le tó bẹ́ẹ̀ kì í ṣe pé bóyá ẹgbẹ́ ló ń bára wọn jà èèyàn méjì tó fẹ́ jẹ́ olórí ló ń bára wọn jà torí pé Sudan wọ́n fẹ́ kúrò níjọba wọ́n fẹ́ kúrò nínú ìjọba ológun kán bọ́ sí ìjọba alágbádá ṣùgbọ́n ìbéèrè tó jẹyọ níbi nínú ọ̀gágun Al-Burhan àti ọ̀gágun Dagolo ta ni ó jẹ́ olórí fún ara wọn in tó fa wàhálà ní Sudan nìyẹn táwọn méjèèjì bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní bára wọn jẹ́ ìjà yẹn ló wá di pé ọmọlẹ́yìn bára wọn ìdí wàhálà tó wà ní Sudan nìyẹn.
ẹ ṣe gan ni nísìnyí Sudan wà ní abẹ́ African Union àjọ tí gbogbo orílẹ̀-èdè tó wà ní Áfíríkà wà ṣé kò wá sí nǹkan tó yẹ kí àjọ yẹn ṣe láti dènà ogun tó bẹ́lẹ̀.
nǹkan tó yẹ kájọ yẹn ṣe wà àkọ́kọ́ ni láti pe àwọn méjèèjì tó ń jà pé kí ni ìdí ìjà tẹ̀ ń jà yìí ìkejì ni pé láti sọ pé ok kí la lè ṣe láti dẹ́kun ìjà tẹ̀ ń jà yìí ṣùgbọ́n látìgbà tíjà yìí ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ títí di bí mo ṣe ń bá yín sọ̀rọ̀ yìí ó lè ti ṣẹlẹ̀ o èmi ò tí ì rí kà èmi ò sì tí ì rí gbọ́ pé àjọ tó ṣàkóso ètò adúláwọ̀ pé wọ́n wọ́n ti pera wọn sí ìpàdé lórí aáwọ̀ tó wà ní Sudan so n tí wọ́n ń ṣe àwọn náà mọ̀ èmi ò lè sọ torí títí di àkókò yìí kò sí ní tí ì gbọ́ mi kankan bí àwọn pèlè ni o àbí wọ́n pèlè ni o bí àwọn ti bá wọn dá sí aáwọ̀ tó wà láàrin àwọn méjèèjì ni o ni ò tí ì rí ká.
nkílẹ̀ rẹ̀ kó yẹ kàn sí.
ntẹ́mi rò kó yẹ kàn sí mo sọ lẹ́ẹ̀kan pé ẹ pé àwọn méjèèjì sí orí tèbù ẹ wá kí ló ń fa wàhálà lórílẹ̀-èdè tó bá jẹ́ pé táwọn méjèèjì fẹ́ kó káwọn máa ṣe tó bá jẹ́ pé n tó ṣeé ṣe ni ẹ bá wọn yanjú ẹ̀ kan kó ní kálukú lọ ọmọ mú kó ní kálukú lọ di ibi kankan mú tó bá sì jẹ́ pé n tí ò ṣeé ṣe ni ó yẹ kí àjọ yìí ní agbára débi wípé àlè sọ pé ẹ̀mí ìjẹ́ fi ṣe ológun lẹ̀ kẹ̀jẹ́kẹ́ lómi ìjẹ́ ọ̀gá tí wọ́n bá ṣe ìyẹn èmi lérò wípé tí wọ́n bá ṣe ìyẹn wọ́n ti fi òpin sí aáwọ̀ tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ ní Sudan.
ẹ jẹ́ ká wọ ọ̀rọ̀ Nàìjíríà gbogbo orílẹ̀-èdè láti lọ ń kọ́ ọmọ wọn ṣùgbọ́n tá a bá wò nínú gbogbo àwọn orílẹ̀-èdè tí wọ́n lọ́mọ ń bẹ̀ ó dà pé orílẹ̀-èdè Nàìjíríà ló lọ́mọ tó pọ̀ jù ìdí èyí wọ́n ní pé ìyẹn pé orílẹ̀-èdè àwọn kan ló ń fa tí ó fi ń falẹ̀ lóòótọ́ àti ń kọ́ àwọn ọmọ wa kúrò àwọn orílẹ̀-èdè míì ti kó àwọn míì ò tí ì kó tiwọn o àìsàn pé tiwa ló yọ yẹ kí ni ẹ rí sí ètò tí Nàìjíríà ń ṣe láti lè kọ́ àwọn ọmọ wa.
ṣe rí tó bá jẹ́ pé èèyàn kan ní Nàìjíríà tó wá tí ń bá rí báyìí máa sọ fún pé aláìlójútì ni ọ kì í ṣe torí pé kò sí ọ̀nà àti ṣe ń ta fẹ́ ṣe o àkàn kọbi ara sí gẹ́gẹ́ bí orílẹ̀-èdè ṣe rí àwọn ọmọ wa tó wà ń bẹ̀ àkọ́kọ́ náà ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ni wọ́n lọ kàwé ni o bákan méjì sí ni torí Sudan jẹ́ orílẹ̀-èdè tó ní àwọn iléèwé gíga yunifásitì tó ti pẹ́ tó jẹ́ pé ìlànà ẹ̀kọ́ wọn dà ọ̀nà kejì Sudan so àwọn ọ̀nà àlùmọ̀kọ́rọ́ yìí kan wà tí àwọn kan fi ń gbà kẹ́kọ̀ọ́ ní Sudan so ó kọ́kọ́ jẹ́ èmi tó ń dọ́sí tí mo wá bí tẹ́yìn pé nǹkan ojú ti yẹ kó wà ń bẹ̀ fún orílẹ̀-èdè Nàìjíríà fáwọn ọmọ àti ẹ̀kọ́ lọ́n kàwé ní Sudan tó wá pọ̀ tó bá wọn. ìkejì àwa fẹ́ kó wọn kúrò àwa ń jiyàn lórí báwo la ṣe kó wọn ńgbà tá a padà kó wọn náà òwúrọ̀gùnrọ̀gùn la lò ńgbà tá ń bọ̀ ọkọ̀ dúró nínú kínní pé wọ́n sanwó fún un ó gba àwọn nǹkan yìí ó jẹ́ nǹkan tó máa ń tó èmi kò ṣe gbọ́ létí Nàìjíríà ó yẹ ká lè ṣe nǹkan tó táwọn orílẹ̀-èdè yìí kò gbọ́ tí wọ́n ní báwọn ní giant nígbà tí giant bá wọn ṣe bí àràrá kò bójúmu èmi ò ní ká má fi mọ́tò kó wọn ṣùgbọ́n tẹ́ bá fẹ́ fi mọ́tò kó yàn náà ẹ ti jẹ́ kó jọjú ẹ mọ̀ sí bí ẹni pé kò sọmọ mi bẹ́ẹ̀ ìyà tí wọ́n kọ́ sí àwọn ọmọ yẹn tó wà Sudan ni pé kò sọmọ mi bẹ́ẹ̀ ẹni tó jẹ́ olórí àjọ tó mójútó ọ̀rọ̀ àwọn aráàlú tó wà lókè òkun Àbíkẹ́ Dábírí lọ́jọ́ tán lọ kọ́ àwọn ọmọ òun lọ ń kí ààrẹ tuntun tí lù yàn ní tó lọ ṣe ń bẹ̀ òye mi torí àjọ tóun jẹ́ olórí ẹ̀ ló ń mójútó àwọn tán lọ kó yàn so nígbà tí nǹkan bẹ́ẹ̀ bá wá ṣẹlẹ̀ tí wọ́n lọ ń kíyàn èmi ò mọ ètò owó ní í ṣe sílẹ̀ ṣé ok iléeṣẹ́ táwa nù rẹ̀ yìí ẹ wá fẹ́ ṣe ètò kan tí bí ẹ̀kan lọ́dún lè máa ń ṣe tó jẹ́ pé gbogbo aráàlú lẹ ti fìwé pé olórí iléeṣẹ́ yín wá ní ìyàwó òun pé bí ìyàwó òun ó ní orí fọ́ọ̀hún láàárọ̀ yìí òun ò ní lè wá tàbí kó ní ìyẹn tí ẹ̀kọ́ òun fẹ́ lọ kí àwọn àna òun kò ṣe gbéyàwó pé òun fẹ́ lọ kí àwọn àna òun so òun ò ní wá ètò tí iléeṣẹ́ òun ṣe kò ṣe gbọ́ létí.
ok ẹ jẹ́ ká wá wò ẹ mẹ́nu balẹ̀ kan pé nǹkan tí yóò dáa ni pé àtúrí àwọn Nàìjíríà tí wọ́n lọ sí Sudan wọ́n máa kàwé tí wọ́n wá tó pọ̀ tún mẹ́ ká wá padà sí ní báyìí irú àwọn ìgbésẹ̀ wo lẹ́rù pé ó yẹ kí ìjọba gbé tó máa fi mú àwọn ọ̀dọ́ tó máa fi jòkó sí Nàìjíríà pé ìlú wà rí ẹ jẹ́ ká ní ìdàgbàsókè rẹ̀.
ìjọba nìkan kọ́ ló ní èèbù nídìí ọ̀rọ̀ ẹ̀kọ́
kì í ṣe lórí ẹ̀kọ́ nìkan o torí kì í ṣe ọ̀rọ̀ ẹ̀kọ́ nìkan ló máa wọ̀nyàn máa jápa.
ṣe rí ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn tó ń kúrò ní orílẹ̀-èdè Nàìjíríà ọ̀nà pé a fẹ́ lọ kẹ́kọ̀ọ́ náà máa ń sábà lò ṣùgbọ́n tábàtì fẹ́ fi ẹ̀kọ́ ṣe àpẹẹrẹ gan ètò ẹ̀kọ́ ṣe àpẹẹrẹ àkọ́kọ́ ọdọọdún níjọba ń sọ pé iye owó báyìí lálàkalẹ̀ fún ètò ẹ̀kọ́ ṣùgbọ́n nígbà tí ọdún náà bá parí kò sí ibi kankan tá a ti gbọ́ pé tán ti máa ń sọ wípé iye báyìí lálàánà fún ètò ẹ̀kọ́ iye báyìí lánà orílẹ̀-èdè Nàìjíríà nígbà tí àwọn ilé ẹ̀kọ́ gíga yunifásitì bẹ̀rẹ̀ University of Ibadan University of Ife tó yẹ bá fẹ́ràn lọ́wọ́ university lẹ́nu àwọn ilé ẹ̀kọ́ yẹn àwọn òyìnbó aláwọ̀ funfun wọ́n máa ń fi orílẹ̀-èdè wọn wá ka ìwé níbí nígbà tí mò ń sọ yìí mo ní àbúrò bàbá mi kan tó sọ pé táwọn bá ń lọ sí London nígbà náà lọ́hùn wọn ní visa láti lọ sí London wọ́n máa ń lọ Friday táwọn òde Sunday yẹ £1.50 ní flight wọn owó ọkọ̀ òfurufú ṣùgbọ́n níṣẹ́jú wa náà ní gbogbo àwọn kìíní yìí fi ń kúrò tó wá fi di wípé àwọn ọmọ wa ń lọ kàwé lókè òkun ní ìsìnkú tó wá sí òkè òkun nìkan mọ́ wọ́n ń lọ Cameroon lọ kàwé kò sí nǹkan tí ò dá ń bẹ̀ ṣùgbọ́n kí pé wọ́n ń lọ torí pé ètò ẹ̀kọ́ ọbẹ̀ dá àbí torí pé ọrọ̀ ajé ibẹ̀ dá ju sí Nàìjíríà lọ wọ́n lọ torí pé wọ́n mọ̀ pé táwọn bá ti ẹ̀dùn bí gan kò ó ṣeé ṣe kí nǹkan mọ̀ dàmọ́ràn so nídìí ètò ẹ̀kọ́ fún àpẹẹrẹ ìjọba gbogbo ní àwọn àjọ tí ASUU gbogbo àná máa ń fi complain pé ìjọba ò sanwó déédéé ìjọba ò tún ilé ẹ̀kọ́ gíga ṣe tẹ́ bá lọ́bẹ̀ nígbà kan àwọn tó jẹ́ olùkọ́ ní iléèwé gíga yunifásitì wọ́n ṣe nítorí pé iṣẹ́ tó wù wọ́n ṣe ni ní ìsìn ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn tó ń jẹ́ olùkọ́ wọ́n ṣe nítorí pé àtijọ́ àtimú ni kò sí ní tí ò dá ń bẹ̀ ṣùgbọ́n téèyàn bá ń ṣe nǹkan torí àtijọ́ àtimú ò ní bìkítà bóyá tó ń ṣe bóyá àwọn tó ń tẹ̀ ń ṣe fún gan bóyá ó yé wọn o àbí ó yé wọn o ọ̀nà kan ní ọ̀nà kejì ni pé téèyàn bá wà àwọn tí àwọn tó wá jẹ́ òbí wọ́n ti wá sọ ẹ̀kọ́ di kò sọ́nù tá a lè lè gbà lẹ́fì rí òbí tí ó sanwó láti pé kán bá ọmọ òun kọ WAEC kán bá ọmọ òun ṣe JAMB títọ́ ọmọ yóò fi kó yunifásitì yóò mọ̀ sanwó tí wọ́n fi bá ṣe JAMB ni ọmọ yẹn wà parí ọmọ wà di olùkọ́ nínú ìgbà yunifásitì láàrin ọdún márùn-ún ọmọ wà di ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n yóò di ọ̀mọ̀wé ọmọ tí wọ́n bá kọ WAEC òun ni ó mọ̀ kọ́ àwọn yòókù.
lákòótán kí lè pé yẹ kí ìjọba ó ṣe àtàràlù tí wọn táwọn òfin ní máa sá lọ mọ́.
ṣe rí àwọn èèyàn lè mọ̀ sá lọ àwọn èèyàn lè mọ̀ sá lọ torí ká tó lè tún gbogbo àwọ̀ eléyìí ṣe ní orílẹ̀-èdè Nàìjíríà yóò ọdọ́ pẹ̀jẹ́ ṣùgbọ́n àkọ́kọ́ àwọn aráàlú gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́ olóòótọ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ àwọn adarí wa náà gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́ olóòótọ́ tá a bá fi òótọ́ inú bára wa lò nǹkan kọ̀ọ̀kan yàtọ̀ díẹ̀ síra wọn. ẹ̀kejì ni pé tá a bá wá sọ pé ok a fẹ́ ṣe nǹkan báyìí ok bóyá a fẹ́ kọ́ skul báyìí a gbọ́dọ̀ rí dájú wípé ìtàlá fẹ́ ṣe yẹn a dẹ̀ ṣe dáadáa. ṣe rí ok fún àpẹẹrẹ nídìí ọ̀rọ̀ pé agbanisíṣẹ́ mo mọ̀ lórílẹ̀ Nàìjíríà ilé ni pé àwọn èèyàn kan ń ra slot ni láti wọṣẹ́ ìjọba àpapọ̀ kì í ṣe owó kékeré náà fi ń ra o níjọ́ wo lẹ ti gbọ́ pé ìjọba fẹ́ gbáàyàn sí bóyá ministry kìnìkan àbí ministry kìnìkan bẹ́ẹ̀ àwọn èèyàn fẹ̀yìntì lójoojúmọ́ ń bẹ àwọn èèyàn sì ń wọlé so bí ataba fẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní fi tọ́ ní bára wa lò ẹ gbogbo àwọn ọ̀nà àlùmọ̀kọ́rọ́ yín táwọn èèyàn ń gbà ṣe nǹkan lórílẹ̀‐èdè Nàìjíríà yá yóò dínkù because èmi ò rí nǹkan gbogbo òsín tí mo lè sọ bí lè ní pé ká ṣe tó yẹ kó lórí òtítọ́ àwọn èèyàn nígbàgbọ́ ní orílẹ̀‐èdè mọ́ bọ̀ ṣùgbọ́n ká bá ti rí wípé ok àwọn tó jẹ́ adarí tó jẹ́ olóṣèlú láàrin ọdún mẹ́rin tí wọ́n fi ń ṣàkóso ẹlòmíín nu wọn á rí i pé ó ti lówó débi àpẹẹrẹ láàrin ọdún mẹ́rin ẹni tó wá jẹ́ òṣìṣẹ́ ìjọba tó lò 35 years nídìí iṣẹ́ ìjọba kò lè kọ́ ilé tàbí kó ra mọ́tò tó bá kọ́lé bí ó kàn kọ́lé kan pé ó lè ra mọ́tò kan torí nínú owó tó ń fi ẹ̀ ń gbà nínú owó oṣù tí ń gbà láàrin ọdún 35 years yẹn náà ló fi rán ọmọ tiẹ̀ lọ yunifásitì àwọn ọmọ tí olóṣèlú tó lọ́dún mẹ́rin wọ́n wà London wọ́n wà US ṣé sálárì tó olóṣèlú gbà láàrin ọdún mẹ́rin ló fi ṣe gbogbo ohun tó ṣe àwọn kìíní yìí ni àwọn kìíní yìí ni ó jẹ́ nǹkan ìbànújẹ́ tẹ̀yìn bá wò tó fi jẹ́ pé ẹlòmíì tó bá kàn ní bí i 5 million kan àbí 10 million kan lọ́wọ́ ìkànnì pé kí ló ń ṣe ní Nàìjíríà yìí yẹ kó máa lọ.
ẹ ṣe gan ni Mr. Ìṣọ̀lá àwọn kan tẹ̀tí wá wòye pé òfin Nàìjíríà gangan ló dínà ìdàgbàsókè orílẹ̀-èdè wípé òfin yẹn ti fún àwọn tó wà nínú tó ń ṣàkóso Nàìjíríà ó fún wọn ní agbára gan ó fún wọn ní àwọn owó ọ̀fẹ́ láti ná kí ni ẹ̀yin rò nípa ẹ̀.
ìbéèrè ni ta ni ó ṣòfin mi tá bá wá ṣe òfin yẹn ta ni ó mú lò àwọn ìbéèrè nìyẹn o tá a fẹ́ ṣe òfin mi ta ni ó ṣòfin mi tábà wá ní àti ẹran tí o nígbà tí ààrẹ àná Goodluck Jonathan wà ń bẹ wọ́n ṣe àpéjọpọ̀ kan national conference àpérò wọ́n sì àwọn àjọ yìí sì kọ nǹkan tó ń pè ní report jáde pé tá a bá fẹ́ kí orílẹ̀-èdè dá o nǹkan báyìí nǹkan ṣe ṣẹ́yìn rí ẹ̀rí nǹkan tó kọ jáde ẹ̀rí report wọn àbí ṣe gbọ́ pé ààrẹ kan dé lónìí tó fẹ́ múlò nù ẹ̀ torí nǹkan kò lè favour àwọn tó dúró lóṣèlú so imbalance ni téèyàn bá fi ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ọdún ṣiṣẹ́ ti ṣèjọba tẹ́lẹ̀ kankan dé láàrin ọdún kan sí méjì táwọn tó jẹ́ pé ẹ̀yin gbogbo àwọn tó ń ṣiṣẹ́ ní ọ́fíìsì náà ní mọ̀ rí pé ọ̀gá náà wọ́n mọ̀ pé ọ̀gá so ọ̀rọ̀ òfin kọ́ o àkọ́kọ́ tábà wo ìdí iṣẹ́ ọ̀rọ̀ ní the security iṣẹ́ pé ọlọ́pàá fún àpẹẹrẹ ìpínlẹ̀ kọ̀ọ̀kan ló yẹ kó ní ọlọ́pàá tiẹ̀ torí ọlọ́pàá tó bá wà ní ìpínlẹ̀ kọ̀ọ̀kan ọmọ Ọ̀ṣun ló mọ Ọ̀ṣun tẹ́ ẹ bá gbé Chinedu wá sọ́ṣun kó tó di pé ó mọ Ọ̀ṣun lójú tẹ́ ẹ kó mọ̀ dé ẹ ti gbé lọ Kogi ṣùgbọ́n tá a bá ní ọlọ́pàá tìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀ṣun ni ó mójútó ìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀ṣun ẹyọ kan nìyẹn o tẹ́ bá wá kúrò ńbẹ̀ tẹ́ bá lọ síbi ètò because ẹ mọ̀ pé wọ́n pe àwọn kan pé eléyìí ó wà lórí residual list eléyìí is concurrent list eléyìí exclusive list Ọ̀ṣun wá ní wúrà fún àpẹẹrẹ ṣùgbọ́n Ọ̀ṣun ní ẹ̀tọ́ àti ìwà wúrà tó ní ìjọba àpapọ̀ ṣé ilẹ̀ wo ni ìjọba àpapọ̀ ní èrò bí ẹgẹ́ tí mo sọ ṣebí ìpínlẹ̀ kọ̀ọ̀kan ló nílẹ̀ títí ẹ̀ so agbára tá a tiẹ̀ gbé fún ìjọba àpapọ̀ ó ti pọ̀ jù ṣùgbọ́n tẹ bá tún wá lò ó tẹ bá tún rò bọ̀ pé agbára tá a gbé fún ìjọba àpapọ̀ pọ̀ jù ẹ wá gbọ́ àwọn tó a pè ní gómìnà nípínlẹ̀ kọ̀ọ̀kan ẹnu yóò ṣe gómìnà báyìí ẹ sì mọ bèèrè lọ́wọ́ àwọn yòókù wípé sọtá bá wá ní ká gbé agbára kúrò níjọba àpapọ̀ ká dá padà fún àwọn ìjọba ìpínlẹ̀ ṣẹ́rù ní báyìí pé sáwọn tá a fẹ́ gbé padà fún yìí gan ṣé wọ́n lò bí ẹ kàn ṣe lò.
kí wàá lọ́nà àbáyọ.
ọ̀nà àbáyọ ó pé wọ́n máa pè ní multifaceted ní èdè òyìnbó òun bẹ̀rẹ̀ síbẹ̀ sí ní sọ yẹn fún àkọ́kọ́ nídìí ètò ààbò ìkejì nídìí pé a fẹ́ ṣe ìjọba wọ́n gbọ́dọ̀ dín owó tí wọ́n ná kù lórí pé a fẹ́ mójútó àwọn tí a dìbò yàn allowance eléyìí ni o kìnìkan ni o ó gbọ́dọ̀ dínkù ìkẹta ni pé tá a bá la fẹ́ náwó lé nǹkan kan tá a bá ná tán ẹ jẹ́ á padà sí di pé ok iye báyìí la fẹ́ ná fún nǹkan báyìí o iye báyìí la ná o tá a bá kówó fún yẹn ní orílẹ̀-èdè Nàìjíríà kó bá wa ṣe nǹkan àìkí padà lọ́ọ̀yẹ̀ wò nǹkan tó tiẹ̀ ló bá wa ṣe tó tá a bá ń sọ̀rọ̀ báyìí ó má dàbí ẹni pé kò sọ̀rọ̀ àbáyọ ṣùgbọ́n àbáyọ wà ó ní mo dẹ̀ sọ lẹ́ẹ̀kan àkọ́kọ́ èyí tó dẹ̀ tó dájú nú ẹ̀ ní ká máa fi òótọ́ ní bára wa lò tá a bá kówó fún mi kí n ṣe nǹkan gẹ́gẹ́ bí kọ́ngílá kí n rí dájú wípé n tí mo ṣe n tí ó ó kì í wá àwọn ọ̀nà tán dà lórílẹ̀ Nàìjíríà láàrin ọdún márùn ọdún mẹ́fà tó bá kó fún mi bí kọ́ngílá pé kí n ṣe nǹkan kí n ṣe tó jẹ́ pé táwọn èèyàn bá débẹ̀ wọ́n ní ó ṣe dáadáa lóòótọ́ ó sì last so maybe àwòtọ́ ọdún yẹn ni ká fi káàdì gbogbo ẹ̀ lẹ̀.
níta ìgbà gbà wá nítorí pẹ́kẹ́ a lè sọ̀rọ̀ nípa àgbáyé ká tún sọ̀rọ̀ nípa àpapọ̀ ká má sọ̀rọ̀ nípa ìpínlẹ̀ wa gangan. ǹjẹ́ bá wo bí gómìnà wa ti ń ṣiṣẹ́ ẹ rí i pé iṣẹ́ tí ó bá ṣe òun gangan fúnra rẹ̀ lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ báyìí yóò mójútó bẹ̀ yóò lọ bẹ̀ ǹjẹ́ ẹ ń fẹ́ kẹ́ gba àwọn ẹgbẹ́ rẹ̀ yòókù nímọ̀ràn pé bóyá bí ń ṣe yìí ṣé bí ń ṣe tó lè jẹ́ kíjọba ó máa rí àwọn pírójẹ́tì tí yóò ṣàǹfààní fáwọn aráàlú tí ó máa pẹ́.
ṣe rí ní tó máa ń kó bá ìjà àwọn olóṣèlú tó jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ àbí gómìnà ní àwọn ìpínlẹ̀ kọ̀ọ̀kan ni pé tán bá débẹ̀ nǹkan táwọn tí wọ́n filẹ̀ ní àwọn tó kù ń bẹ̀ tán filẹ̀ wọn kì í kọbi ara sí èyí ló dẹ̀ jẹ́ pé ok ẹ wọ̀ṣun nígbà tí ìjọba Adémọ́lá Adélékè dé ọ̀nà Òṣogbo sí Kírun sí Láòdò ìjọba Adémọ́lá Adélékè kọ́ ló bẹ̀rẹ̀ rẹ̀ ṣùgbọ́n ó bá níbi tó wà ó dẹ̀ ṣe débi tó wà nínú kò sí and kì í ṣe yẹn nìkan oríṣiríṣi iṣẹ́ náà ìjọba Adélékè bá ń lẹ̀ tó tún dáwọ́lé pé a parí ẹ̀ tó bá dẹ̀ já àwọn kan ní tó bá débẹ̀ ní tíjọba tó kù ń bẹ́ẹ̀ ń ṣe lọ wọn à ní débẹ̀.
ó túmọ̀ sí pé àti ń rí yàtọ̀ díẹ̀díẹ̀. This is we appreciate you very much, Mr. Shola Ishola, for being part of our magazine programs, Saturday Morning Treat. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your office. This is a convenient Oluchi.
Yes, it's a convenient time. I want to say thank you very much for making it to the program, and you have actually spoken about the Sudan crisis and issues also in Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This is where we'll be saying our bye on the first guest platform on Saturday Morning Treat. The program continues. Please don't go away.